Welcome everyone to this fifth session of the summer school, where we'll talk about how to identify carnivore sign. Right, so it'll be Koustubh Sharma and me who's doing the talk today. And I will start by talking about how to track and focus on, well, dog and cat species, but it's basically the same. You can track whatever you want, if it's ungulates or badgers or anything, the principles will be the same. And we'll also talk a little bit about, or I will talk a little bit about how to inspect and determine what's carnivore killed the animal when you find carcasses. And we'll start with tracking. So the art of tracking, a lot of the examples here will be from Sweden, and it's just because I have most photos from here. But as I said, it's the same, so it's just different. Well, each track or pug marker is a bit special for each species, but the principles are the same. So tracking is fun. It's really interesting. You follow the animal, you can learn a whole lot, both scientific information, but also for yourself. You can really study in detail what they've been doing, which will teach you a lot. May not be able to write everything up, but you'll learn for yourself at least. This information is pretty easily collected. Though if you're not careful, you can be incorrect, and then you'll come to the wrong conclusions. So it is important to be very careful in your interpretations. It is much harder than you think to track, partly because there's a huge variation in tracks, and what you may think is a strange track is quite often normal. So you might see this photo of the perfect wolf track, and that's what they should look like, and they do sometimes. But quite often they don't look like that. And so we may think, oh, this is a strange track, but it's quite often just that because of the substrate or whatever the animal was doing, they will look, well, different from what you would expect. Also, you'll rarely know the truth unless you track and see the animal who's left the tracks. You won't be 100% sure. So it is important to be humble, try to think critically, and just remember that there are very many different things that can happen here. So, sorry. So you as a tracker, you really need to think critically. Does this make sense? Is it, am I, can I draw the conclusions that I'm doing? Be humble and don't think that you're an expert because you've done it a couple of times or maybe for years. You can always be surprised. Try to remain curious of what could have happened and why does it look like this? And do pay attention to all the details. And remain critical to yourself and your conclusions. And perhaps also people who tell you, because as I said, it's hard to know for sure. And one of the fundamental, or perhaps the most fundamental thing is you have to track for long distances, because most of the errors or the conclusions that's not correct will be corrected if you track for long enough distance. You'll figure out which species it is, how many animals, the social status, if it's adults or sub-adults, depending on how they mark, and so on. And I'll give you some examples here. And before I do this, I should say that it is very, very difficult, and it's even more difficult from photos. So if your guesses are incorrect, do not feel bad, because I'm trying to show you how difficult it is. So there's a size reference in this photo here. This thing lying here, it is 7 centimeters in diameter. These are lynx tracks. And we can see in the chat, can anyone guess how many lynx have walked in the photo to the left and to the right? You can write left number of lynx, right number of lynx. Right, so Justine was actually right first, but then she corrected herself to 0. No, it is 1 lynx to the left, and there's 2 lynx to the right. So even though the cat to the left, it's walked very slowly and put the paws very close together. And to the right, the 2 lynx the second lynx have put its paws in the tracks of the first one. But if you had tracked the 2 lynx to the right far enough, you would have seen eventually that they would have split up. So do pay attention to all the details. Try to maintain eye contact with the track at all times, because eventually something will happen and you can determine like number of animals or social status because of how they mark. And if you leave the track, you might risk missing these important details. Also, try not to walk in the track, because if you realize that you missed something or the track disappears, you want to go back. And if you walked in it, it may be hard to see where it angled off or if they split up. And while I say this, especially for you working in mountains, you have to track safely. And if it's a snow leopard or something like that, sometimes you may have to leave the track. Yeah, try to maintain eye contact, but do it safely. I'm not gonna ask you this, but here's an example of why you have to track for long distances. It's not easy to figure out how many there are, but eventually they will fan out and maybe separate so that you can tell this is a wolf pack, and just in this case, it's 5 wolves. But it may be very difficult, and you might have to follow them for a couple of kilometers before they split up enough so that you can determine. It is great to take photos. It will help you and you can show them to people later, but identifying tracks in photos can be extremely difficult. And so quite often people send photos to us and ask what it is, and it may be completely impossible to tell. So don't feel bad if you can't say. If you do take photos, always include a size reference. And the best reference is a measuring stick. But if you don't have that, use something that is, everyone knows what size it is. And here's an example of a track without a size reference. So we can do the same again. Can you guess what species it is? Red fox, says Justine. Jackal. I can give you a hint. It's a cat species. Okay, sorry. It's actually impossible. This is a house cat. It's a common cat, like a house cat. But without the size reference, it could be anything from a tiger to a house cat. The one thing you might have used, which is not easy, is that there's also bird tracks below the cat track, but it could be a big bird, and they're not super obvious. So yeah, without that size reference, it's impossible to say. It could be anything. And then people may send you, I actually took this photo, photos like this, and ask what it is. And it's really hard to tell in the photo. In real world, it wasn't too difficult. That's a snow leopard. But in the photo, the details don't stand out. So taking photos of tracks is very, very difficult. What you should try to do is both get a photo of the pug mark or the track, one track itself, so you see all the details of it, but also like here, that you can see the gait or how the animal walked or ran, because that will also help you. And here you see there is no size reference, so it's not a very good photo because of that. What you also may want to know is how old the tracks were, like how long ago did the animal walk here? And this is not easy to determine either, because old tracks can be more detailed than fresh ones. And both weather and the substrate will affect this a lot. And then the weather will vary between how exposed the site is or how protected, like will the wind or the sun affect the track. And there's a huge difference, for example, between ridge lines and valleys. So just substrate, as an example, we have snow condition here. And here you have, well, we Swedes, some of these photos are old, and quite often we use this type of can as a size reference, and they are 7 centimeters in diameter. So you have two different species here in the left photo. And the left one is a gray wolf, right one is a red fox. They're actually quite identical. It's just that, well, the wolf is much bigger. But then to the right, can anyone guess what animal has walked there? And the size reference is the same for both photos. Does anyone want to take a guess? It's a canid. Yes, it is a red fox. Exactly, it's the same. So this track and that track is the same species. It's just that the snow is much looser, so the track will look much bigger. So yeah, the substrates will affect what the tracks look like. So the parts of these tracks or pug marks is that you have the contours, which is the outline of the track itself. Claws you may see depending on species. Toes are digital pads, and then this, yeah, it's a pad, like it has different names depending on front and back leg, but let's just call it a pad. So these are the things to identify in the track. You have to differ between front and back paws. It's necessary both to determine the pace, measure gait or gait length, determine number of animals, and also if you want to try to measure the tracks. This is difficult. It's very, very hard to measure tracks. And they can, as I said, they can vary a whole lot. But it could also be a good help. But it won't be very exact. So here's okay. Let's just look at this. Actually, there's a smaller animal who's walked down here. But if you look at the bigger parts, can you guess how many animals have walked here? Walk upwards in the photo. We ignore the one going down. So we have suggestions for 2 and 3. So it's actually 1. So the big one is the front paw, and then you have the back. And then front and back again. So the front paw is much bigger than the back. So that's why you need to determine which paw it is. And it's the same here. This is one track. That's the front and the back paw. Whereas, and here you have 2 tracks, 2 different animals. So, as I said, measuring tracks is perhaps not very useful, but you must distinguish between front and back paw. And always measure the length, because I'll come to that. But if it's a hard substrate, they might keep the paw like this, whereas if it's loose, they'll do that. And so the width of the paw will change a lot. Never include the claws in the measurement. and always try to measure several tracks from the same paw. And the same, I mean like right front paw or well, left back paw, it doesn't matter, just take the same paw because the size will vary. And do remember, as we looked here, both weather and substrate will affect the size. And I'll try to show you an illustration here, see if it makes sense. So here's the paw going into the ground, and here's the surface. It could be snow or gravel or sand or whatever. So if it's loose, it may sink all the way up to here, whereas if it's a hard surface, it would sink here. So in a loose surface, you'll see the entire, like the solid lines of the track, whereas in a hard surface, you'll see these dotted ones. So of course, if you measure, you get this measurement on a hard surface, and you get this measurement in a loose surface. So yes, the substrate will affect how big it becomes. Then the paw could slide a little bit. Especially if it's running fast, it might move just a little bit in the substrate. And as I said, weather, there will be some measuring error. So yeah, measure a few, but it's difficult. I hope it's visible on the screen, this photo, but here's a wolf again. And depending on how you measure, you could try, is this where the pad ends? And is this where the toe ends? Then you'll get like 10.5 centimeters. Or you measure from here to there, and you'll get 13 centimeters. So it's not very easy. Here's a perfect wolf track, much easier to actually get a measurement from. And you'll see it's a hard surface, so the paw is quite closed in. That's the individual tracks. So then we'll also have to look at pace and the track positions. So there's 4 different paces, that like main paces. The animals can walk, trot, or gallop / leap. They're more or less the same. And when we're tracking, we have to differ only between 2 different gaits. Walk and trot, and gallop or leap. Well, gallop is, incorrectly spelled there. So you measure the gait length, and then you measure from the same paw. So let's say right front to right front, or left back to left back. That's the gait length. And that will give you an idea, because like you can look in books what the gait length is for different species. And so if you measure this and you look at the tracks, you can see, okay, this makes sense that it is a Asiatic golden cat and not a leopard or whatever it could be. The usual gait for, well, wolf or most canids is trot, and they do walk, whereas for cats, they mainly walk and sometimes trot. And when they walk, they can put their paws in paws, which means this. So here comes the right front foot, and then the back foot goes in the same track. Front, back goes there. Front, back, front, back. And so basically you will only see the tracks from the back paws. The front ones will be, they won't be very visible. And of course, if you now try to measure the size of them, they will not be perfectly placed in each other. So that will be difficult. Yeah, sorry, right front and back, left front and back. And this is the gait length. So you measure from, well, in this case, it doesn't matter, but right, let's say right front foot to right front. If they're walking slightly faster, you'll get this instead. You have the front and the back, front, back, front, back. there's arrows here. So for canids, the front will be depressed a little bit, the pad here, or maybe concave, whereas the back will be convex, or it goes, the pad goes a little bit out. And here the gait length will be, now you can measure from front to front or back to back. And you measure, of course, from the same place. So if you want to measure from here, or if you want to measure from here, it doesn't matter, just as long as you use the same place up there. So yeah, what I tricked you with is that sometimes animals walk with an angled body, and then you get this. So you get the front feet and the back feet, which will look like two different animals, one bigger and one smaller. And then you get this front back, front back, front back, or front back, front back, front back. So it isn't two animals, it's just that they walk with an angled body, and the front and back paws differ. So it looks like this. You might have seen maybe dogs do this or so. For some reason, it's easier for them. And I apologize, but some of these drawings will be in Swedish, and then V means left and H means right. So here you have the starting from below, right front, left front, right front, left front, and then you get the back, right back, left back. But it will look like this could be one animal with bigger paws and one with smaller. And sorry, I did. If you have any questions, please write in the chat or interrupt if there's anything you wonder about. Then they can gallop or leap, and you'll get a set of tracks. And basically, it works like this. And again, apologize for the Swedish, but V is left, H is right. So first, the animal will put down its back feet. I have those two pug marks here. It makes the leap, leaps, and lands. So first, you get a front foot, and then the next front foot goes into the ground, and then the hind part comes and lands here. So you get one back paw and the second back paw. And this constitutes a set of tracks. So you have two front and two back. And they can also vary depending on how fast the animal was running and what snow depth or, well, substrate. I think it could be gravel too. So this would probably be the typical one. It would look like this, but there is some variation. So you can't really say they should always look like this. But you get a set. There's always front and back, two front, two back. But it could be more like a straight line, and they can shrink, and sometimes they even put paw in paw here too. And they can even put, well, both back paws in the front. So you only get two tracks in each set. But what you do get is these sets, I think, which is so there's always a set of tracks with all four paws, and they can look like this, that you have four. It could be three, or they can be two, because they put the back paws in the front paws, pug marks. And if you look at them, in real life, it'll look like this. Here's a pretty easy example. The animal has been leaping. They can also look like this. And of course, this is a set of tracks. These ones, I can't really say where. I think this is the set, and most likely here too. But I can't tell from the photos. As I said, I forgot to write it down, and it's been a bit too long. And from photos, it isn't easy to determine tracks. So I am a bit unsure when looking at these. But in real life, it will be much easier. And then you can also look at the pug marks and individual tracks. It should be like this. Okay, and the reason you have to be able to measure or determine what gait the animal used is that if you think this is an animal galloping or leaping, but if you instead thought it was trotting or walking and put paws in paws, you would get say this is the right front, and then this would be the right front again. And you would measure this gait length, and it would be 130 to 150 centimeters. And then you check your book, or maybe you remember that, okay, this is probably I'm not sure, common leopard. But the correct is that this is gallop, and then the gait length is 3.5 meters instead, which may not be what a leopard does, and instead is a wolf, or this is a wolf. So yeah, you need to be able to measure both. Sorry? Oh. So both the individual pug mark, but also the gait and the step length are keys to identifying. So if we look at canids then, and I'm going to use gray wolves as the example, this is the front of a wolf paw, and they will look like this basically. So here's the back paw and the front paw. The front is slightly bigger, and also you see this pad is depressed in the back, whereas in the back it goes out. If you want to try to remember this, it's almost as if you took a B and pressed up, so you get like the outline of a B here, as in back. These are symmetric tracks. There's no difference, like all the pads are similarly shaped inside, like that one is the same as that one, and these two. They have sturdy claws, and the front paw is bigger than the back paw. You can mix them up with dogs. These are large tracks from a large dog, and they're actually larger than wolves. And they're, yeah, I mean, it's basically the same species, so they are difficult to tell apart. From the tracks, you can't really do it. You have to look at gait length, step length, and how they move, basically. So the wolf will use greater gaits, or it would be much further than dogs. They usually trot, and they have a determined direction. They're going somewhere, whereas dogs are often out investigating. I have to say, I'm not really sure about feral dogs in Asia, what they behave like, but in general, this is the case. So I can't say for all different countries. And if you compare a wolf to a lynx or a cat, you say that you can make a cross here. It should be able to do a cross between the pads, whereas in cats you can't. it will hit the center pad. This won't be possible in all tracks just because of the way they put their paws, but this is it could be useful. And as I mentioned, in a hard surface, the paws are often closed in, like they walk like this. So you have a wolf to the left and a lynx to the right, whereas in a loose surface, they may open up their paws. And then the wolf may look a bit like a cat. And here you see the lynx have put out its claws. So it looks a bit like a wolf instead. So, as I said, never decide based on a few tracks, because there is a large variation, and you need to track for longer distances if you want to be sure. So for the cats, here's a lynx. All cats, I shouldn't say all cats, but all cats that I know of, their middle pad here is a bit depressed compared to the canids, where it goes more up. And you can see that depression in the tracks too. So looking at lynx or snow leopards are, I mean, all cats are basically the same. They have asymmetric tracks. So you see that the toes or the digital pads here, they are not the same. It's like our hands. So this one is the right foot, and you can tell, yes, if you look at your fingers, that finger is higher up than that one, and it's the same with the cats. On the central pad, they always go out like this, both front and back. Especially for the lynx, there's lots of space. They're kind of open in here, and you can't do this cross. You may sometimes see the heel. I'll show you that on the next slide. Looking at the snow leopard then, yeah, here's the heel. It's that thing there. That can be visible in some tracks. There's less space than lynx. Here's a snow leopard track. I think they're surprisingly small considering. So here's a snow leopard paw. I think it's because it's usually a hard surface and that they walk often like this. You rarely see that they open up the paws. So given how large paws they have, I think they are surprisingly small tracks. With the lynx and the snow leopards, you see the contour far outside of the pads because of, well, all the fur. So they may, if you measure the contour, it will be big, much bigger than the paw itself. It's really not unusual to see claw marks from the cats. They use them if it's a little bit slippery or so. And here they're very visible. You see the claws up here. So all these are lynx, even though just looking at them, they're shaped more like a canid. And as I said, it's far between pads and toes. Here you actually see the heel. That one is the heel from the front paw, that little depression there. So don't get fooled that it's some other species. You can see them on cats too. And here you see the lynx have tried to not go through the snow, so it really spread out its paws, or toes, sorry. And here it kept it together. So if you would try to measure these two tracks, it would be a huge variation just because of the snow. Yeah. It's the same lynx, it's just different types of snow. And they do look different. So here we can do an example. So let's see if this, yeah. So here's two different species. It's I'll give you so it can be lynx, wolf, or red fox in all examples. So if you can guess, if you want to guess, like what species to the left and what to the right. Flavia thinks it's lynx and wolf. Justine the same. Ali too. Yeah, you're all right. The left one is a lynx and the right one is a wolf. So yeah, you have the claws up here, and you could make the cross. So they do look like lynx and wolf. What about this then? Anyone want to take a guess on what this could be? It's also, you can choose red fox, lynx, and wolf. Christine says right is a red fox. Fox and lynx. Lynx and fox. Uva. Red fox to the right, says Ali. Two red foxes. Yeah. This is actually a wolf to the left, but it looks very much like a lynx. And it is a lynx to the right, but it doesn't look like a lynx at all. And here it has actually, it especially kept the two front digits together. It's all even hard to determine which direction it went here. So it's a really difficult photo. It's just to hammer in the point that you need to track for long distances. Here's a photo from Mongolia. I'm actually not sure what species it is because I didn't write it down. I took it a long time ago, but it's also, whether that's a wolf or a snow leopard, I'm not sure. But just as an illustration of how difficult it can be. And I can't even remember what it is. Here's another example. I'm not going to make you guess all the time, but here's a dog to the left, even though it looks quite much like a lynx. And to the right, it's a lynx again. That looks quite a lot like a dog. And here you see the substrate, like how they, depending on if the snow carried them or not, the tracks will change. And these are lynx. Let's see, I think there's another photo. Yeah. Bears and badgers and wolverines have 5 toes. And if you see tracks like this, you know, lynx should have 4 toes. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there's a 5th one. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 5th one. Can you guess what happened here? Front over back. Yes, correct. They walked in the same tracks. So that's one, and it will look like they have 5 toes, one over the, yep, you're both correct. Here's another example. That's a fox, but I skipped that. Okay, so this is a hare. That's another thing to consider. Their paws can look quite a lot like carnivores, and these are also hare. So I just found an example. So here's a wolverine. So they do have 5 toes, like this. Badgers too. So there are some species with 5 toes that can confuse you. So that was the tracking part. As I said, if you have any questions, do you want to? If you have any questions about this right now, you can ask. Otherwise, we'll continue with carcasses. We'll go for carcass investigation. So quite often when you do track carnivores, you might end up finding things that they've killed and eaten. And if you're sure of your tracks, you may know, well, you probably have a fair guess of who killed the animal, but sometimes you do find these carcasses without tracks, and then it might be difficult to try to figure out who killed them, or if there's been attacks on livestock. So typically, a lynx would bite and kill their animals in the throat. So you'll find the killing bites here. Snow leopards, well, they could also bite them in the back of the neck, but this is pretty common where you will find killing marks. A wolf, well, they do tend to, it depends on how big the animal is, but they can bite in many different places. Usually they kill by biting them in the neck. Or smaller animals like sheep, they might just bite over the back and shake so that they break their backs. Larger animals, they bite here to stop them, and they might bite in the nose to keep them standing still in another one or kill it. They can also bite here and here, so that wolves are a bit more difficult. Brown bears, they usually bite them and break their backs, or up here, or crush their skulls. Red foxes, they bite here. I think it's the same for all foxes. Dogs, I am not sure if this is true for feral dogs, but I think it would be. They're not very good at killing, or not at all as efficient as the wild carnivores, so they're going to bite a bit everywhere, quite often low, and then here. But it's going to be quite messy because they're not very efficient. So here's an adult sheep that has been killed by a wolf. It's usually, well, there's a lot of injuries to it, so they look a bit messed up. It won't be possible to determine unless you skin it, and because you have to find the marks from the teeth. And do not skin if you suspect it could be carry a disease or something. You should not handle the carcasses. But if it's especially if it's livestock and you know that it was in good condition before it died, then you can skin them. So here's a lamb, a sheep lamb that's been killed, and all these are bite marks, like the holes. Do you want to guess what it is that killed it? This one is also from Sweden, I should say. So it could be dogs, wolf, lynx, fox, and golden eagle. Those are the brown bear. Justine says wolf, lynx, teeth marks. Yes, these are teeth marks. All these small holes here, or yeah, bite marks, maybe it's called. This is actually a fox, and you can see they're also not very good at killing, or they're good at killing, but this is a pretty big prey for them. So the fox has been biting like bum, 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 bum. So there's lots and lots of bites here. A wolf would have it would be one bite and then rip it open basically. And the lynx would have grabbed it once and kept it and killed it. So you can see there's been some, I'm not sure frenzy, but it's been attacked over and over and over. These are adult sheep. They've been killed by lynx. So you can see here the bite marks. Here I think it might have bitten it twice, but it's not as much. It doesn't get ripped apart as much. Okay, here's adult sheep. Does anyone want to guess what killed them? Wolf. Wolf. Both Justine and Flavia guess wolf. Yeah, you're right. It is a wolf. So here it bit the sheep over the back and basically broke the back. This one has been bitten in the hind leg and probably killed up here after that. So yeah, they're adults, so it's easier to see. It must be a fairly big animal. Here's an adult man. You want to guess what bit him? Wolf. He's been wolf. He's actually been bitten by a brown bear. That's how far apart. It's a big animal. He was probably quite lucky. So yes, that's what I intended to share. Thank you for listening. Do remember to work safely, especially when you're out tracking in the mountains. This is just an introduction, trying to show you what you need to think about. Teaching tracking from the desk is probably not possible, but there are great books. You can ask experienced field staff. Remember that, as I said, it's hard to get the truth. So when tracking, and you have to be humble and critical. So don't be critical towards other people, but think critically if this. We all have to make guesses, but if it makes sense, or how certain the conclusions are. We all get things wrong when we track, and it is very, very difficult. I could tell you, maybe 7-8 years ago, two very, very well-known cat researchers, they were standing looking at a track and discussing which way the snow leopard had walked. And I came there and I realized they're looking at the track, one of my tracks. It's the heel of my boot that they're looking at. I didn't say anything, but people, it's easy to make mistakes. So don't feel bad, and stay humble and open and curious. Feel free to ask a question sorry, how long can you train for before starting to have some confidence? Ignoring these problems, of course, asked Flavia. I think if you go out, that's a good question. It depends so much. In snow, it's easier, of course, especially if it's maybe like this much snow. In deep snow, it becomes difficult again. They always say that there are tracks they can't be sure of, but I think you can go out and be fairly confident. You don't have to do it a lot before you can feel that you're good enough. But the key really is to realize that it's difficult and be humble. So don't be overly confident. Maybe I can't answer. I'm sorry. Try to find someone experienced and go out with them and learn. Some good reference books on tracking, carcass identification. I don't know anything for Asia, to be honest. Maybe Koustubh knows.
Hi. Hey, Orjan. Hi. So there are several books. What we will do is we'll just, not several, but there are a few books which provide a very confident guidance on how to ID tracks. But I think, Orjan, you put it very well that it's an art. And as it goes, you can learn good singing in a few months' time, or it can take you several years if you're someone like me who has no clue about anything about music. So I think it's the same principle probably goes here as well, right? You can learn it quick or take a long time. But what we will do is, I know of a couple of books. I'll just try to find the link and put them in the chat window from Asia that have provided some sort of a guidance on IDing tracks. But again, please take each reference material which claims any sort of a deterministic characteristic to say that this is what it will look like. I mean, you just saw some of those incredible examples where a wolf track looked like a snow leopard track, and a snow leopard track looked like a fox track, and so on. So I think that's where I think the relevance of book becomes limited, and field experience and your personal ability to go out and look for science. There's no alternate to it, I think. Yeah.
No, that's true. It's true. But yes, use them with care, because what they will choose is the typical track. But as I said, there are very many tracks that you may think are strange, but they aren't. It's just there's such huge variation. But it's a good start.
Yeah, hello.
No.
Hello, yeah, this is Dr. Vinita speaking from Jammu and Kashmir, Central University of Jammu. I'm sharing my personal experience, which I had during the tracking for snow leopard in 2012. So maybe as Koustubh sir said, this is a personal experience. Yes, I said, maybe instinct also sometimes. There is a typical type of smell, different type of smell. For example, it depends upon person to person or the person aura, how much it can incense. Different type of scenting or scent is present around the tracks. So if we have get down that particular experience in the field, remaining there for maybe a 24 hours or maybe for continuous 48 hours, we can easily identify, or we can say we can easily come up to the conclusion which animal went. Especially in the case of carnivores, we can easily differentiate the felids versus the canids in this case, ma'am. Because different type of senses, incense, smelling power, it can be helpful for the persons, because we are using the dogs and these things. There is no need of reason. We have to train ourselves, our nose also, by simulations we can do for this one. Because I tried this one here during my PhD, and I got always my positive result. And after PhD, when I work with my husband for snow leopard trekking in India, we got 100% positive result for all the snow leopard tracks.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But it requires sort of field experience. We have to simulate ourselves. For example, a very typical example is if we brought some deodorant or a perfume, when just spray it, and after a short while, again a new perfume we will get, or we are choosing. That particular first smell is still stick in our nares. So we have that particular instinct. We can easily smell, yeah, this is that one, this is that one. In this way, we can train our nose also, our brain also, with just smelling these different type of hardcore smells of carnivores. Because especially for carnivores in cats, there is a different sense. And for this one, canids, you will feel a tangy smell. What I can say, as per my experience, because in the snow leopard area, there may be only the canids. It will be a wolf. It can be a red fox. No other canid is present. It may be a stray dogs, but stray dog is totally different. We can easily identify, or we can easily differentiate. But using this power also, we can differentiate some.
But so you mean you smell the tracks itself, or?
Yeah, sir. Yeah. Why? Because there is a glands present in this particular area. Each and every body part have a sweating glands. But in canids, they have the sweating glands only in this particular region. So, but around the track, the animal where they move, where they used to inhabitat, all those things accumulated in the paws portion of those animals. It can be a carnivore, canid, or it can be a felid, but different type of habitat influences also that smell. It is not only the smell of a canid itself or the felid itself, the surrounding where that particular animal used to move, that things club inside the hairs of that particular animal, that particular give a specific sense. And nanomaterials using nano sensing, devices, we can devise such type of nano sensing device, which we are working for snake identification. If snakes is present inside nearby the home, we are devising different type of snake sensors, so we can easily sense the presence of snake without seeing where it is hide in our house, because each and every person, or each and every individual, and each and every species have a different smell.
Yes, yeah, no, that's true. Absolutely.
Oh, this is though we are saying it is experience, but there is a science behind all of this, because such type of things are going on. For snakes identification, we are working with the Snake Indian Mission and devising such type of things. We can try this over the nano sensing and accumulating different type of persons from different background. We provide the idea to them, and they are from the nano sensors. They can develop a sort of nano sample, so specific smell, so that we can easily detect those things. Maybe in near future we will come up with this particular type of technology.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what we can do. Absolutely. I completely agree. Let's see, Ali, you raised your hand.
Thank you very much for the great presentation. So actually, I want to share, I have one question. So based on the evidence that I have, was whiteness in the Wakhan National Park. So usually when the snow leopard entering in the corral, so because all the sheep and goose, they're frightening and jumping around. So the snow leopard attacking each individual until all the herd killing, or maybe more than 20 or 15. So in 2 occasions, in last year, one snow leopard stuck inside the corral with multiple injuries and multiple killing of sheep and goats, and in 2 other occasions, so the predator entered inside the corrals and killed massively sheep and goats, but there is no any signs of tracks or any signs of because it's very difficult to distinguish because multiple attack in different parts of the bodies. So my question is there any possibility to distinguish from the bites to measure the canine teeth of the wolf or the snow leopard? Is there any possibility, and how we can measure that? Thank you.
Yes, it's a very good point. And I think first, as you said, when they enter these corrals and there's multiple killings, that becomes a bit of a special case because there's animals running around everywhere. So they might bite in different places then too. It's not like the typical thing is you have one animal out in the mountains or in their natural habitat.
Yes.
So here it becomes difficult.
Yeah.
I agree. And of course you won't see any tracks because everything will be, there's so much commotion that it gets destroyed. Yes, you can measure the width between the teeth, but I am afraid it will probably be quite similar for snow leopard and wolf. I don't remember those measurements on the top of my head, but quite often these are difficult because you would think quite often you can tell if you skin them, you get more this one bite mark from a cat, whereas the wolf is more thrashing, like ripping apart. But like again, in situations like that, it's not. I think we'll have to. I'm not going to reply now because this is something we could maybe do a workshop or a training in, but I haven't thought that through. So I don't know if anyone else has any replies, but I'm sorry, but I might just say the wrong thing. So I'll have to wait. I saw there was a question from Uva. Is it common for front paws to be bigger than the hind paws? And are there any exceptions? Yes, well, there are exceptions. Bears, I'm pretty sure hind paws are bigger. And so, yeah, it's, so with lynx, there is no difference. With snow leopards, the front paw is bigger than this hind paw. So you can't really, I can't say that it's the same for cats either. So I'm afraid that you just have to look in a book. So there are exceptions. And then Flavia asked, can you talk a bit about the other types of evidence the animals leave that are useful, how to find and ID them? I find it difficult to see the broken branches. Yeah, broken branches and such, those are difficult. I'm not sure how much you can tell from them. Entirely different cats on a carcass. I mean, cats are useful, but of course, if it's a cat species and you try to think which cat it is, then I think it may be difficult to use them. I don't even know tigers and leopards, if you can confidently say what cat is from which species. Again, maybe Koustubh would know. I'm not that familiar with many of the species in, I've only worked with snow leopards. In Asia, I mean. I don't think I am going to say anything because I'm not an expert on this, so I might get it wrong. But do you have anything to add, Koustubh?
No, not at this point in time. Maybe we can come back to these questions, Orjan, so that we don't. I'm a little worried about running out of time, and then Rocky and Justine will will trouble us. Is that okay? Yeah, Flavia will definitely come back. To these questions again. My experience is truly entirely limited to Asia, so I also may not be able to say much. But yeah, let's quickly get to snow leopards, and then we can possibly come back. So yeah, now to start with, thank you, Orjan, for really ending at a very, very pertinent point about trying not to be overconfident. And oops, is this still at the wrong? This is the slide I wanted to start with. I'm sorry. Right, now I'll start with a very quick anecdote, and it's very similar to yours, Orjan. While in your case, they were looking at your shoes heel marks. In this case, I remember walking with a very, very renowned vulture expert, and we end up noticing a sort of a nest way up on a tree, and I think one of us exclaims, "Oh, that looks like maybe it's the white-rumped vulture." It's the vulture, and then this vulture expert he just says, "No, vultures. The white-rumped vulture will never make a nest on this tree." And the moment he finished saying that, a white-rumped vulture just raised its head, looked at us as if saying, "Yeah, right." So I think the point that you're also making, Orjan, I'm just trying to drive it home further, is that one can never be too confident or never be too sure about these signs and indirect signs of presence. And it's really very nicely put in your case that it's more of an art, and one can really consider natural history to be more of an art than something that you can just hope you will learn in 5 classes or 10 classes or with X amount of experience. Now we all know the snow leopard, and we know that it wears an invisibility cloak, so much so that it makes it impossible to see it unless you have a very, very specialized skill set. Now, I know it's almost become synonymous for me to be making any presentations on snow leopards and coming up with one of those find the snow leopard images. But this one is a little special because it's one of the first images where, which is a true find the snow leopard images taken in late 1980s by Raghu Chundawat. And the reason I also invoke him is because It was him who taught me, at least, a little bit of the art of tracking signs and presence. But coming back to this image, I believe few of you may have noticed, or if you've noticed, then pat yourself on your back. This is where the snow leopard is. It just melts in the background, and which is the reason why you need to look for indirect signs to find where snow leopards are. And it is not often that you see a snow leopard like these people are seeing. And this was in early 2000 in Chitral in Pakistan, one of those early days, or one of the first few such public sightings of the snow leopard. Now, we all know snow leopards have massive, massive home ranges. As you can see, the red dots moving about are snow leopards. It does stop once in a while, as you see when the snow leopard slays an ibex, which are the green dots. But if you look at the scales, these animals have huge, huge home ranges, and that's something that makes it extremely difficult to not only spot them, but also for individuals to meet each other. But anyway, so the point I'm trying to say here is that snow leopards do tend to have massive home ranges, and as Orjan can confirm, having successfully collared more than 30 snow leopards and tracking them individually with radio telemetry, with satellite telemetry, we know for sure that the snow leopards do meet each other. But how does a species that covers such massive ranges interact with each other when they're mostly solitary? If I ask you, how do you reach out to friends, especially in today's day and time, when you are, either separated by space, or for various reasons you are in different parts of the world? I think we all use social media. What I believe all the companies, all the social media developers should do is they should ideally pay a royalty to snow leopards for truly inventing the concept of wall posting. And to show what a wall posting looks like, which is a snow leopard social media, I'll just share this little video, which Flavia, who's here in the audience, had very kindly put together. A typical snow leopard wall post includes a little bit of a scraping, which is a very distinct cat behavior, a little bit of rubbing the cheek, which too is a very distinct cat behavior. But what this rubbing that you see here does is it often leaves a few strands of hair on that rock, which then become fairly reasonable evidence, and then turns around and leaves this little spray. So that's typically what a snow leopard wall post looks like. What it does is these little wall posts are like communication. These wall posts do exactly what our social media wall posts do. They will leave signs. Probably, they could be a female with cubs saying, "This is my territory. I have absolutely no interest in you. Just leave me alone. I've got cubs." Or it could be another female saying, "Okay, I'm looking for a boyfriend." Or it could be a male warning other males, "Stay out of my territory." So a lot of that communication, which could otherwise mean hostile interaction by fighting and having a physical altercation with each other, is avoided through these signposts, through these wall posts on what we can call it as Snow Leopard scrapebook, the Snow Leopard social media. But when snow leopards leave these signs, they do leave sometimes you might turn lucky and you will end up putting up your cameras at a location, or you might find a location where not just one, not just two, but tens of encounters can be happening. So what you see here is a time lapse of about 2 months period where a number of times the same animal has come, not the same, a number of times different animals have come in and gone by. And what it really shows is that if you're looking for snow leopard signs, these are the kind of sites that can turn you lucky. Now, Orjan mentioned, and you might all recollect, that wolves and snow leopards do overlap. In fact, there are feral dogs as well. But one thing that probably separates a snow leopard's marking in a territory is the height at which they leave their sprays. As you can see here, it's fairly higher than the height at which a wolf or a dog will leave their spray marks. And these spray marks can be fairly diagnostic. In some cases, people do use feces, and snow leopard feces or wolf feces. Right, there's my other slide. Yeah, and sorry, that was a wrongly placed slide. But if you've done a good job, with identifying where a fresh scrape is, with a little yoga skill, you can just go and dig your nose right in and try to sniff the fresh scrape. In this case, this researcher was able to walk back to the same scrape where a snow leopard had left a scrape and a little urine marking. Now, while that's still okay, it can sometimes be a little misleading, and I'll just come to that. In fact, we were having a bit of a discussion about the smell. So when I was learning a little bit about identifying signs, there was a theory which some of our field assistants would share, that a snow leopard scat smells more sulfuric, whereas a wolf scat or a canid scat smells more leathery. Now, while so far so good, as long as you don't have to test how accurate you are or how inaccurate you are. And then, of course, in the snow leopard realm, it has been widely popular that you often find scats at the tip of a scrape. What you see here is a little scrape. As you can see, the snow leopard has sort of created a little hill or a little pile towards one side. And often, or on many occasions, you will find some scats on this little heap over there. What was remarkable, and what is remarkable, is now at least we do have the technology to be able to do a deterministic identification. And this was one publication in 2014 where our colleague Kuban, who should have ideally taken the session today, but unfortunately he's traveling, he collected several scats. I think he collected about 50 or so, or maybe 70 or 80 snow leopard scats. He collected about 50 or 60 wolf scats. When I say snow leopard scats, he used his and the field assistant's collective knowledge to say that, okay, this looks like a snow leopard, so this should be a snow leopard. When I say wolf, again, it's putative wolf scats. And also, in addition, there were certain habitats which seemed snow leopard habitat and certain habitat which seemed distinctly wolf habitat. More rolling terrain is where a wolf is likely to be. More rugged terrain is where snow leopards are likely to be. But as you can see in the bullet points below, only 67% of what the field team considered to be snow leopard scat turned out to be snow leopard. The others included wolf, feral dog, even marmots for that matter, and also I think foxes. On the other hand, what's even more charismatic here, and what's more fascinating here, is that out of the 72% or out of the 50 or 60 scats that he thought, or that the teams thought were wolf scats, only 72 turned out to be wolf. But in the remaining 28%, 16% turned out to be snow leopard scats. And that was quite remarkable and quite fascinating in many ways, because we would have never expected, or we would have not thought that snow leopards would be using those rolling terrain where those cats were found. And that was quite surprising. But as you can see in this little video, which was shared a few months ago by someone in Mongolia, I mean, snow leopards and wolves do, well, ignore the classic music here, but yeah, you can see the snow leopard running in front with wolves chasing it down. There seem to be, sorry, yeah. Forgive the audio there, but the point I was trying to make here is that snow leopards and wolves do overlap quite substantially, and there is a very high chance of confusing them unless you're using genetic information to identify individual species. Yes, best audio, of course. And again, I mean, I just want to show this another very interesting video. Just keep a track of the dates on top. This is July 2nd. A snow leopard comes in front of a camera. This is somewhere in the Himalayas in India. And a snow leopard comes right in front of the camera, defecates right there. It used, I mean, for many years, we've been talking about it, that snow leopards use urine and fecal scent as communication. But I know it's still anecdotal, but what really does happen is within a few days, within 3 days, a fox visits this cat. Within 5 days, another fox comes, visits, and defecates right on top of what was snow leopard's cat. And in just about 5 days, a fresh scat is now looking like an old scat. Now, this is just one of the many times the fox visited. In the next 20 days, the fox apparently, or maybe different foxes, visited this little, this one scat of snow leopard, I think about 8 or 9 times. 4 or 5 times they defecated upon it, and the remaining time they just came in, just sniffed about it and moved away. I think the point I'm just trying to drive home here is that even if you see what may look like a snow leopard's cat, there is a chance that you might be, if you just collect the top of it, you might be collecting fox scat. If you go under, maybe that's where the snow leopard's cat would be. And if you're doing some diet analysis or diet surveys, that's where it becomes almost mandatory, given the low cost and given the availability of the technology today, to really run the data through a genetic scanner. With any level of field experience, there is bound to be some sort of an uncertainty. And unless we can quantify that uncertainty, it's always going to be a guessing game, which is why it's really, really critical to what Orjan kept talking about, to be humble and to be open to be wrong when you're identifying any tracks or signs. So yeah, truly, I'd like to just stop with that. And what you see here is not just snow leopard tracks, but apparently wolf tracks as well. And yep, if you have questions, we'll be happy to answer them. Again, I don't promise I would know all the answers. Orjan's got much more field experience than anybody else here of tracking snow leopards in the snow leopard habitat. But yeah, please feel free to ask questions. If we can't answer them now, we'll be happy to get those answers or get as close to as possible to those answers and get them to you. Thank you.
Orjan, I have a quick question.
Sure.
That links to Ali's question of how in Sweden do they currently look at these conflict events? Are they using genetic techniques to identify? Because I know for compensation in many countries, they try to identify the species. So do they take genetic samples from the dead sheep or goat and then identify what species?
Yes. Absolutely. So that's why I know lynx and wolves very well, but I don't really want to go in. I'm not good enough with the species in Asia. But just what we do here is first we skin the carcasses and look for these bite marks. Then we have trained and certified dogs that are if they find a track of a lynx or a brown bear or a wolverine or a wolf, they will mark it, and each dog has a way of signaling. So let's say if it's a wolf track, it will sit down. If it's a lynx track, it lies down. And they have been tested. So they're called ID dogs. So they are accurate. And then we also collect saliva DNA from the bite wounds. So we don't take DNA from the, like where the animal might have been eating in case like a lynx killed it, but then a fox came and ate from it. So they locate the bite wounds, and then you swab them with like a Q-tip, basically, and collect DNA from the saliva of the carnivore that killed the animal. So that's what we do. But then, of course, they get compensated. So it's very important that this is correct. So that's how we do it here. Did that answer the question?
And I might just add, so Flavia, your question is very similar to what Orjan's just explained. Even with DNA, when they try to ID the species which the scat belongs to, they usually take the swab from the top, from the crust of the fecal matter. And when they have to do the diet analysis, they go inside and find the species that it may have consumed. And honestly, don't be surprised to hear this, but there has been a few incidences where even some herbivores scats were collected, considering them to be snow leopard scats, and it was there. There was no snow leopard DNA at all in that entire scats cover, because that's where you would assume the mucus of the feces from the species where it's come from. But yeah, diet analysis can be extremely messy, and it could be safe to say that until many years, all that we were, most of what we knew as snow leopard diet was a mixture of diets of many species, as we've just noticed with this paper, and several publications have ever since been using species identification with DNA.
And Koustubh, I have a question. Thanks so much also for your presentation. Just as people think about their questions, so please come in and please intervene if you have a burning question. Just asking one question that's coming to mind is, with models such as occupancy models, with this presence absence, we do rely on signs often, right? And as we discussed, there are issues of misidentification. But as these occupancy models develop, there's also your ability to allow for that misidentification, right? I just wanted you to reassure us that not all past, that there is a way forward, even if we can make errors.
Absolutely, Justine. Although I must also warn on that front that even in that case, you must know the possible source of error. What could be causing an error for even the occupancy model to be able to deal with it? So you have to be able to have some sort of an understanding where errors could be happening. And end of the day, statistics is just numbers in, numbers out, right? It's for us ecologists to be able to define those right parameters on what to test and how to test. So yes, I mean, although there are tools which allow for false positives, as they call it, like even if the snow leopard was not there and someone assume that it is present, it can deal with that. But for the models to be able to deal with that, they need a lot of information, and which is where it becomes extremely important. What Orjan was talking about, which is collecting as much information as possible so that you can use that supplementary knowledge about these signs to be able to assess the confidence with which you can ID it, or you could have misidentified it. So I think you can model how wrong you could have been based on those additional parameters. And that's where it becomes very important. But nevertheless, in most habitats where snow leopards are, I think we've almost unanimously sort of agreed that the scrapes are a fairly good assessment of their presence. There's not many species which, other than the snow leopard, which can make those nice, neat scrapes of that size as well. So it goes with fair amount of confidence, at least in those areas.
I agree.
Yes, so
I agree. I have two things that I first with the scrapes. I completely agree with that. The only thing that I've seen that is a little bit confusing, I think I'm not sure if it's horses or ibex that sometimes they sort of dig to get to the roots of a plant, and it almost looks like a scrape. But if you find this plant in the middle that's also been eaten, but I've seen that a couple of times. Have you seen it too?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you're very right. I mean, not just that. I think who else does that kind of? Yeah, you said ibex. That's true. Yeah, ibex, or even some of these livestock, right?
Yeah,
they seem to do that digging a little bit. Yeah, I agree.
But if you look, but sometimes it looks very much like a scrape. But if you do find this little plant that's been eaten, it. But I also wanted to say, especially when you had a photo of snow leopard and wolf tracks in rather deep snow, and maybe you thought I was mean with all those difficult photos, but I didn't even go. Especially cats, I'm not going to say that they're lazy, but they're energy efficient. So they like to follow other tracks because it's easier than to make the track yourself. So most likely the snow leopard there had followed the wolves. But if you find that, maybe you'll see 3 wolf tracks and you don't even look for the snow leopard in them. And here with they follow ungulates too, especially here in Sweden, moose, because they have very big hooves. And you could have a lynx family walking in that moose track for a long time, and it's easy to miss because you see the moose, but then if you look carefully, there might be some indication that there's a lynx in there too. So yeah, it becomes even messier when they walk in other species tracks.
And much more messier when you talk about summer, when there won't be any tracks at all. I mean, at least in many parts of the range, I mean, you just don't see any tracks whatsoever.
Yeah, like gravel and sand or mud is then it becomes like you want to track for a long distance, but how do you do that? It's not easy.
Rocky is asking a question, Orjan. How accurate is identification of tracks? It's like artwork, Rocky. You remember artwork? How beautiful is Mona Lisa? It's almost like that. But go ahead, Orjan, please.
Well, if you have someone who's really, really good and humble, like I think to me, the best trackers are also very humble in acknowledging that, because they have been wrong so many times, and they have explained to someone, oh, this is a wolf, and then turn out it's a squirrel or something. And so you learn from experience that, okay, you shouldn't be overly confident here. Those people are, yeah, most often, I can't say, but if they have a track that they can follow, I think they will be right in the end, almost always. But if it's just a few pug marks, I kind of like the people who say, I'm not really sure. I think it's a wolf, but I can't say. I trust those the most. If it's not if they haven't tracked for a very long distance, then I don't think you can be sure. I don't know.
And for genetics, what were the papers suggesting, Koustubh? I think a few papers have said some error rate. Is it 30% or something like that?
So I mean, I know this paper by Kuban where almost 60-70% were wrong, that were correct. The rest were all wrong. Yeah, there are a few papers after that as well. I think we can share them. They should all be on the Snow Leopard network. So
I think roughly it's between 40 and 60% that's correct, I think, if I remember.
Yeah.
So there's a fairly high error rate. And Flavia's question about how messy a diet analysis could be, that is true. And it's even worse when you color the animals and want to do visit kill sites in summer, because then it can be pretty bad when you find the animals a week after they've been killed and it's warm. And you want to collect. Then we often collect jaws or something for age determination. That can get messy.
But despite all the mess, it's still a lot of fun to track animals and to try and decode signs in the field. So
here's a question from Raki. How do you know if the carcass is diseased? Yeah, you can't really. So what I meant was if there's livestock, like if a carnivore killed livestock from either in a corral or out in the mountains and the herder found it immediately, then I think you can assume that it wasn't sick. But if you find a wild ungulate that has been killed, you can't really know if it carried the disease or not. And then you don't start skinning them unless you know what you're doing, because so you don't contract any diseases, especially if you're in an area where there are bad diseases. I mean, if here in Sweden, there's not much you can contract from them, but in Mongolia, I would be more careful.
I think, Orjan, sorry, I remember many years ago, I think that you all had found a snow leopard carcass and then you left it as it was and waited until you had a vet come in.
Yes. And
so
then
that's common?
Yeah, we actually we do not do necropsies on the snow leopards, simply because there's depending on where you are, but if it's very far to hospital and you do not have the proper equipment to like disinfect everything, but I don't think you should do inspect the carcasses. Actually, what happened there was the vet came and she refused to inspect the carcass too. So we never looked at it because we didn't have the proper safety equipment. So yeah, you can contract really mean diseases. So do be careful.
Also, just to add, in 2005, the first snow leopards were collared in Pakistan by this researcher who used to study cougars. And a couple of years later, he found a dead cougar when he was back home in the US, and he brought it home to do a necropsy. And next day called in sick. 2 days later, for 2 or 3 days, there was no contact, and he unfortunately passed away. So he had apparently contracted some pathogens from the dead cougar and died. So yeah, please, huge word of caution to not approach some of these dead animals without appropriate measures. I've forgotten his name. I have met him once, but I'm sorry, I can't recollect his name. But yeah, we know that sadly this is what had happened as well. If you see the film Beyond the Myth, you'll see him collaring snow leopards in Pakistan.
Any comments on prey species and differentiating between livestock? I know that's another challenging one, like blue sheep or ibex.
Sorry, distinguishing, how do you mean, like their tracks or their...
Tracks and pellets. I don't know if there's an answer. I'm just putting it out there.
I've never seen a blue sheep.
Ibex. We can take it with ibex, Orjan.
I think it's more or less impossible to distinguish ibex and goats. They're basically the same. I don't think it's possible to do with confidence. Because I mean, a small ibex there will be overlap in the size of the hooves between a small ibex and a large goat. Of course, the tracks of a big ibex male is maybe bigger than what a goat could be, but I don't know. When the pellets are, I think I've heard that ibex pellets are usually more like together, whereas the goats is more like pellets are more one and one, but there must be variation there too. So
just don't even try. Don't even try with prey droppings. They're bound to be so wrong. And I'd say this with with limited experience on some antelopes in central India, which are not even a snow leopard habitat. And every day you come up with a theory, okay, this is what a dropping looks like, and it'll look completely different. And the reason is because the diet keeps changing. And if they're on a fruit-based diet, because some tree is flowering or fruiting, the droppings will look entirely different than, sometimes they even look like a lump, which looks like a carnivore's cat. Whereas when you look at, they're just all stuck together in multiple boluses. And yeah, so don't even try. That's what I'd say.
Sorry. There was a question here from Sonam. Soon I am participating in the nationwide snow leopard survey here in Bhutan. Do you have important advices other than the discussions made earlier? I think, like you said, Koustubh, scrapes are, I'm not sure exactly what scrapes are the most certain signs, I think.
Yeah. Can I just add one quick point to that, Orjan? So,
Yeah.
And this is a fascinating experience I can never forget. So we were doing camera trapping in one landscape in South Gobi. And then we moved to a landscape which was just a few kilometers east. And when we got to this landscape, some sites we saw a lot of signs. Some sites which we thought, based on whatever little experience we had, we thought there should be a sign here, but there was no scrape, no sign whatsoever. Now, in an ideal world, we would be tempted to not put a camera trap there, but maybe there were some devils in the over our heads, and we just ended up putting some camera traps there. Eventually, what really happened was we got a lot of snow leopards photographs on these sites where there were very few scrapes as well. It turns out that either the substrate was very difficult for us to be able to detect scrapes, or there were a lot of livestock which were constantly, stamping over the scrapes, or it was just something else going on. The cats were not really scraping as much. We don't know for sure, but the point being, if you feel there are good sites and you're not seeing any sign of a snow leopard, please do still put a camera there if your sampling design is recommending you to put a camera trap in a site. So I believe in Bhutan, there is a fairly good design recommendation that has been provided. So, usually it's like one dot, and anywhere within 2-3 kilometers, you have to find a good site. So if you find a good site with scrapes, go for it. But if you don't find a site with good scrapes, and you're tempted to not put a camera trap there, I'll suggest you still put a camera trap where a snow leopard would come if you were a snow leopard. Think like a snow leopard kind of thing. So that's one point I just wanted to remind, at least from one experience that we had, where we thought we'll see nothing, and then we ended up with almost as many snow leopards as in the other landscape. So that was quite remarkable. But Justine, you've been doing it a lot as well. So if you have any other suggestions, maybe that could be useful.
Yeah, if you're doing sign surveys, Sonam, as well, I'd suggest remembering also that snow leopards follow ridges or valleys along a continuous length. So just consider that if you see some scrapes or tracks, that continuously. I think it's better to note that you see these tracks, and we look for continuous correlation later in the model. But just for you to realize, that those are areas that they're going to be using. So that's the best places to see signs as well. So to travel to maximize where you will see signs, which is like the valleys and ridges. But with camera traps, I think Koustubh's going to share more secrets next week with Puji. So we're going to get some more insights from there too. But if you're more on science surveys, I think, as the others said, putting as much information as possible to be able to also have some level of certainty afterwards. If that's either the type of sign or, or following it for a little bit, I don't know, some other measures to increase your certainty.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful suggestions and advices. Thank you so much, Koustubh, Jonathan, and Justin. Thank you so much, and I will take note of it. Thank you so much. So if I need any clarification or further advices, so I would keep on disturbing you guys. Thank you so much. Anytime, please, without even hesitating.
Yeah.
And Sonam, Orjan said that you can't take pictures of signs and know a species. So you basically have to invite them to Bhutan to join you in the field. That's what he was hinting to. Anyway.
Yeah, obviously. Thank you. It will happen. I think it will happen sooner or later.
Thank you. Yeah, we're happy to help. And don't get discouraged by it sounding difficult. It is it's very fun, and you learn a lot. Just as we've said, humble and remain critical to your conclusions. I think that's the key. Otherwise, you'd stop learning. But yeah, thank you. I hope there was some new ideas.
Thank you so much, Orjan and Koustubh. That was really amazing. I think we all learned a lot, and the presentations were excellent. Thanks a lot. Koustubh, we look forward to seeing you next week with us again. Orjan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
See you next week.
Thank you.